to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie authors on the journey toward publication. I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
I'm Christina Catane, and I write in multiple genres, including Christian dystopian fiction.
I'm Rhonda Hagerman, and I write both fiction and nonfiction. I'm currently working on a series of articles for my hometown historical society.
Great. So our first segment every week is where we get together and we ask each other how we're doing, and we like to call it our What's Up. So this week, let's start with you, Rhonda. What's up with you?
Well, I've gotten my garden under control, and it's not perfect yet, but I've been able to discipline myself to write instead of only garden. And I've had family in town, so that's been a little distraction, but a good distraction. And so I've had some things on my plate, but I've been disciplined this week. What about you,
Yay.
Jamie?
Well, it's been a really good week for writing and just kind of for life in general. It's just everything is kind of humming along. Nothing really new to report. Tina, what's up with you?
Well, I'm going away to camp meeting next week, and so I'm just working real hard, trying to work some extra hours, make some extra money. That's about it. Jen, what's up with you?
Well, I am getting ready to go to camp meeting as well. I'm going to crash Tina's party. Me and my girl are
Yay!
going to be camping
I'm
with
so
Tina
excited.
this week. I know I am too. And so that's kind of my focus a little bit along with writing. I've been doing some editing on Phoebe that I'm excited about. I'm actually getting some new stuff written, and it's finally starting to chug along. So that's where I'm at.
That's exciting. That's awesome.
Thanks, I'm excited. All right, so this week's topic is from our Faith in Writing series again, sharing the gospel with your writing. Before we get started, though, I think we need to touch a little bit back on to be specific about what is considered Christian writing. If you guys were to have to define it, or we're going to talk about it, what would you say makes a piece Christian writing?
I would say that your audience is specifically Christian
Oh, that's good.
readers, or people that you want to influence for Christ.
Good, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of it in terms of who the audience of the book is. I had always thought of it more of what the content of the book is. So I really like that perspective, Tina.
Or, but speaking of content, what would you say about content, Jamie? Is there have to be certain kinds of content for it to be Christian?
Well, I feel like it's kind of weird for you to call on me because as someone who I'm a writer who is a Christian who does not write Christian fiction, sometimes this is kind of a weird no man's land for me. I mean, I'm a part of a group that's called Clean Indie Reads, and they don't say Christian in their title, but because it's like a clean version of what you might find out in the world, like it wouldn't be objectionable to a Christian. So I guess I would like other people maybe to chime in on that because to me, I feel like what are the distinctives? It's sort of elusive to me.
Right. I think that's a good point, though, to make because I think that maybe, especially someone who is maybe starting out as a writer, wouldn't realize that there is a difference between clean and Christian. So I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. So, anyone want to speak on that, the difference between clean and Christian?
Well, I had brought up in our podcast, we talked about this a little earlier, that when I went looking for what publishers are looking for in Christian fiction, they are looking for demonstrably Christian content. So they want more than a nod to niceness or cleanness, and they want it to be, demonstrably Christian.
So that would
So like, go ahead. So like what? Like people going to church or people reading the Bible or talking about scripture? That, like, yes. I mean,
yes, all of the above.
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it depends on the book, really, but you're not going to pick the book up and wonder, oh, I wonder if this is Christian. It's going to be obvious.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
And but it shouldn't go to the point where it's divisive either. Like it should not
Right.
focus on denominations or certain doctrines. It really should just be a Christian perspective if you want to be labeled Christian and not specifically like a denominational type writing.
Right.
All right, good.
All right. Awesome.
And so, Jamie, you were talking about clean writing. What would constitute something that's a clean read?
Well, I think it's funny too because in those same groups that I was mentioning, I guess the woman who started the one group in particular just was looking for a place to discuss clean books, and she doesn't always write clean. So there's a spectrum, I guess, that she would find acceptable to read, but she had squeaky clean, I guess, standards for books that she would recommend to her clean read audience. So it's like always a fade to black when it comes to romance. It's, maybe some kissing, um, you know, uh, not real violent or gory content, things that I suppose would be unobjectionable. I mean, I suppose if you had to slap a rating on it, it would be PG or better.
Right. Oh, that's a good point. That's really good. And like so my genre specifically, if you were going to do Christian romance, there would, like Tina said, there would be blatant Christian themes in it. There would be scripture maybe involved. There would be more than just a nod to like attending church. And then a clean read is usually what we call sweet romance.
Mm.
Would be very similar. There would be no like intimate scenes other than maybe kissing, um, but it would be like what you would see on the Hallmark Channel, something along those lines, where there's still romance, there'll still be kissing, and there's still definitely like some heart fluttering, but there won't be anything that you couldn't let your child read. So that would be the difference. So, all right. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about what constitutes a Christian fiction, um, how do we as Christian writers spread the gospel
Well, I think
Without writing.
with our writing? Sorry, thanks,
yes.
Jamie.
I think one of the most obvious ways is to have a salvation storyline
Hmm.
where the actual gospel is presented in the book to a character, and that character either accepts Christ or doesn't. I mean, I guess they wouldn't have to necessarily accept Christ as long as the gospel was presented.
Jen, I know you have a conversion storyline in one of your books,
Hmm.
and I don't recall. Do you actually type out the words that is presented, or do you just sort of intubate that a conversation happens? I can't remember. I don't
Um,
think I've read that section.
you haven't, but it will be released onto ebooks and paperback by the time this airs. Available on
Yay!
Amazon and other
Shameless
Then I
retailers.
will
plug.
know.
Searching for Anna coming soon. Um, I did not blatantly include the actual prayer, not because I think that you shouldn't, only because it just didn't fit the story. I had been peppering throughout leading up to the conversion. I've been peppering things that he was learning, things people were saying to him, scriptures and like that throughout, just like I think it would be in real life. Like you don't just all of a sudden get introduced to the gospel and say, "Oh, okay." Usually it takes time. Like it's like the planting of the seeds by the time you get to the harvest. And so, excuse me, sorry. So, mine does not blatantly do that, but he does end up on his knees at an altar with a pastor, and the pastor says that well, let's pray, and then that's where I like basically fade out for that chapter.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I was just wondering because, like, I just wonder what questions. It's really just interesting to think about if a non-believer is reading the story and what questions that would cause them to ask. So thanks for telling me that.
I have another one as well in the book after that one too, and I handle it even a little bit more differently. So
Cool.
yeah.
So, yeah, well, okay, that's just straight up a conversion story. But, a lot of people who are Christian authors, they are a little more sneaky about stuff with like allegory. So, like, by allegory, I mean, well, you're talking about the gospel and you're talking about Christian conversion, but you're kind of not. Like, your words that you're using more parallel the gospel story.
Hmm.
You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
Pilgrim's Progress is one of the famous ones. Although I don't know how
Yeah.
sneaky they were because the main character's name was Christian. You know,
I know. And like, I've read other stories where like the person's name is Faith or something. And then, the other person will have a name that's not like sinner, but it's
Right.
it's like, everyman or something like that.
Right.
Right.
There's also books that do the archetype of Christ as well. I mean, there's classic ones out there like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where Aslan
Yeah.
is seen as an archetype of Christ. Can you guys think of any other examples?
Well, the Lord of the Rings, the King in the Lord of the Rings is the archetype of Christ, and then Sauron is the archetype of Satan in that story.
Yep.
So that's, you have to be a little bit more of a detective to see the gospel in those types of stories. And you wonder, like in the case of Tolkien, did he do it on purpose? And sometimes you wonder, are people like projecting that on, like I've seen some real stretches, right? Like people will go see whatever movie and then they'll say, oh, this is actually, this character is an archetype of Christ and blah, blah. And then you wonder, well, does the director agree with you
Like I've
about
heard
that?
that before about the Matrix movies. And I mean, it's
Oh,
kind of a stretch too because his name is Neo, but the words can switch around to one. And like, there's this whole like, if you want to look it up, there are people that like talk about how it's very much an archetype. But I don't know that the director or the writer ever meant that. But it for sure can come out that
Mm-hmm.
way. The rebirth that has to happen, how your eyes are opened to like and how attractive sin looks. But when you're in reality, life is hard and all those things. So
My
yeah,
son is really good. My son is really good at doing that. We would go see a movie, a cartoon, I don't know, Disney movie or whatever at the movie theater, and the whole way home he would be regaling us with how this character was like Jesus and this character was like the devil, and like he would do that like just naturally. So I think a lot of that does happen.
right. And I think it's
well,
easy too. It's one of those almost kind of like a oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when I'm writing something, a trope. There are a lot. Some people use the story of Christ almost as a trope without realizing that they're using the story of Christ because it's just so ingrained in our culture. I mean, it has to be. I
Hmm.
mean, God's our creator and Jesus is our salvation. So like we wouldn't be here without them. So even people who like reject the gospel, they're living in the world that God created. So I think oftentimes that it's used as a trope when they don't even mean to do that.
Hmm. And our whole Old Testament is full of stories where the main person in the story, is an archetype of Christ. You know,
Hmm.
Moses, Noah, Abraham.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
All right.
well, and how awesome of a parent would I be if I could turn everything into a story about God and, just hammer into them principles, precept upon precept and line upon line like that. My brain doesn't make those connections as quickly, but whether it's intended or not, how cool would that be to just always be glorifying God?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great. All right, so we talked about the archetype of Christ and we talked about allegory and salvation storylines. Are there any other ways that we can spread the gospel with our writing?
Well, transformation stories, either people that aren't saved or are already saved or just living out their life. I mean, God is working on all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all have a story where there's something that needs to be challenged in our life and change that needs to be made. And so I mean, the possibilities are endless.
Mm-hmm. Can you guys think of any examples? I have one that I can think of right now. Karen Kingsbury's A Time to Dance. It's about a Christian couple, but they've kind of gotten away from their relationship with Christ, though they're still Christian, and their marriage is falling apart. And God transforms not only their marriage, but them as well. So that would be a good example of there's not a
Mhm.
salvation message, but definitely a Christian book. Anyone else?
Mhm. I think C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. That's obviously, the demons aren't trying to give a salvation message, but you, I don't know, C.S. Lewis is such a master in the way that he used them. You really do hear the gospel
Mm,
in a completely different way.
good.
Yeah, and I can't remember the main character's name, but he's really put through the paces, and you can see yourself and your own walk in that series of challenges.
Hmm. Another really good book that I read is called Demon, a Memoir by Tosca Lee. And that's a story of a man who's down and out and about to give up on life completely. And a demon approaches him in the bar and asks him to write his memoir. And this demon ends up telling the entire story from before the fall of the angels all the way through man's salvation, and then leaves him hanging at the end and says, well, you know, you just, well, I'm not going to tell you the end. You should read it. It's really good.
Yeah,
It
Tina,
does
no
sound good.
Randy
spoilers on
Alconiaz
our
will make that
podcast.
It's excellent. And, you know, I don't read the same kind of genres as you guys do, so I was thinking of This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti. It's a story of Christians living out their everyday lives and how the things that they choose to do in their everyday lives affect the spiritual battle that's happening all around them.
So that would be another way that we could show the gospel through our writing, is just showing Christians living out their everyday life.
Yeah.
Without it, you don't have to have a salvation message. You don't have to have a transformation, but there could be the Christian characters just living out their lives, like praying, using scripture, relying on God for everyday things. So that would still constitute a Christian.
Yeah, and I think that is why the genre of like prairie and settlers and sort of all of that lends itself to Christian writing, because those people really had to trust God and rely on God to provide for them, to provide healing if somebody were to get sick. Some towns didn't even have a doctor. And so I think that's why the genre of those genres work so well. And you could find so many books written about the frontier in Christian fiction.
That's a great point. And it probably also brings to light that your genre probably will dictate what type of route you take for spreading the gospel. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Because I can't really imagine, Western frontier allegory. It would be a little tricky.
Yeah. Dystopian.
Although I'm sure, archetypes probably pop up a lot. Particularly, greater love hath no man, right? Like, so the one sacrificing for the lives of many, or the one sacrificing person. You see that in a lot of different genres, so I think that they can often cross over as well.
Very true. Really good. All right, so now that we've talked about Christian fiction, let's talk about those who do not write Christian fiction or Christian nonfiction, but write fiction as Christians. Can you name some fiction maybe that was written by Christians, but it's not, what they write isn't Christian fiction?
Well, I mean, we talked about The Lord of the Rings a little bit. That was not, I don't think, received as a great work of Christian fiction when it was released. And I don't believe that the people who go to the movies or whatever are thinking that they're supporting Christian fiction when they go.
I would agree with that. Jamie, you were talking about a short story writer.
Yeah.
You're planning. Do you want to talk
Flannery O'Connor. Yeah, she was a Catholic. I've talked about her on previous episodes, and she wrote short fiction that dealt a lot with grotesque, like the deformities. They called it grotesque fiction back then, and she was a Southerner, so she wrote a lot of Southern writing. So people characterized her by those two things, but then often when you read about her, she was heavily influenced by her Catholic faith, is what people say about her work, which is interesting because, the whole premise of one of her short stories is a woman realizes that she's pregnant. Like, that would be the elevator pitch to that short story. And you wonder, like, so how are people saying, well, her Catholic faith really influenced her work? But it was more in her essays and her letters and her public speaking events and just her life as a Catholic. She didn't hide it or shy away from it. And so it's just very interesting to me that although people pray in her stories and call out to God when, death is upon them, I'm not sure why people are like, oh, her Catholic upbringing really influenced her work, other than that she would say so. So it's really quite interesting that she was a person of faith who wrote stories that were not Christian fiction. And yet still it was clear, and her legacy is that her faith influenced her work, and so many people will be curious about that going forward. And so personally, that's the kind of influence I hope to have. I hope that people will know that I'm a Christian by things that I say and do, like posting that I read my Bible daily on my website, for example. And I am really hopeful that I can emulate that as I write.
That's great. Excuse me. Yeah, so you answered my next question. I was going to ask you what you plan on doing, so that's really cool. All right, so let's move on to nonfiction then. What about some nonfiction that's written by Christians, but their work is not Christian, considered Christian work?
Yeah, like James Dobson.
Or like his parenting books.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he has a lot of parenting books that are blatantly Christian, but he has many that are used in secular areas as well. That
Right. And I think just relationship books in general, too.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Well, because I think a lot of people who are Christian have a heart to help people,
Yes.
and they really want good things for people. And, they want salvation for people, but they also want them to have, good families is good for our society. And so
yes,
tools that you can create to equip people. I know that Dave Ramsey, he's a big believer, but
yes, that's
his
another.
books are completely approachable for people who are outside of the faith. Like it's about budgeting, it's about money, you know.
Right. And the great thing about
Mhm.
authors like that is that somebody would come across a Dave Ramsey book or even a James Dobson book, and may not be a Christian, and then might happen across another one of their books or happen across their website, and then they'll be introduced to the gospel that way too, in a much more non-threatening way, because there's many people that would never touch a book if it had any sort of Christian theme to it. But they would touch a Dave Ramsey book, and then they find another book by him, and they're going to be much more open to reading it. And he's got some books that are, like more testimonial kind of books, and that would definitely spread the gospel. So that's kind of a cool thing. And his website too. There are sections of his website that spread the gospel, and I think that's really cool too.
It's so funny too, like if you took the reader experience and extrapolated it to how humans interact with one another in the real world. Some people will go to church because they know they're going to get something good from it. And some people would never step into a church, but because of the relationship that they have with Christians, they will still hear the gospel. So it's almost kind of like real life, but in book form.
Yeah.
Am I making
Yeah,
sense?
Yes.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I mean, you move to a new town, you need to meet some decent people to hang out with. Well, I'm going to head over to the church because I expect good things from people in a church, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Rhonda, as
Yeah.
a nonfiction writer, have you thought about this? Like how you'll handle
Mhm.
like this, or if you will, like, have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, well, I do have one specific family that I'm going to write about, and there are two sections to this family. The one is Christian all the way, as far back as I can research them, like 250 years, very involved in their local churches, and you can see in their life how they've lived that out. And then there's another family. Actually, it's a husband and wife who are fairly recent from around the 1920s. They got married. Her side of the family, they were very unchurched. They were not religious in any way. And you can see that certain members of their family, they were in trouble with the law in different, white collar ways, blue collar ways, whatever. And then this other side, they were always very upright, solid citizens of the community. And so I'm going to write about them. And so that's one thing. But like some of these other writers, I'm a seed planter, like you mentioned earlier, Jen. And I think that outright preaching in a nonfiction article is not my forte. So hopefully people will see my Christianity through what I write, even though it's not specifically going to be about what last week's sermon was or whatever. For instance, just today, I had packed too much into my day and I was running behind. And I said, God, I need you to help me. I need to add just like an extra half hour to my day. Can you do that, please? And within about 15 seconds, I had to stop in the middle of the road because this little family of ducks started toddling across the road. And they were so adorable.
Aww.
And it was exactly what I needed, but it's not what I prayed for at all. That did not add a half hour to my day. But it made me stop and think, God, you are so amazing. Look at these look how smart this little mother duck is. Was I that good of a mom? And I just loved it. And it completely changed my whole paradigm for the day. And so anyway, if a non-Christian asks me about my day, that's a story I can tell them, and it's not preaching to them, but it's helping them see what God does for me.
Amen.
Amen.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies, it is time for us to transition into one of our favorite times of the day, of the week. It is time for the feeding of the backs. Woohoo! It is feedback time. So here's a reminder of what we do here on the podcast. We submit a raw, fresh, unedited piece. We actually write it the 15 minutes before we start recording the podcast, so it's that raw. It helps us to develop a safe community for receiving criticism, because we each take turns at just being flat out vulnerable in front of each other. And because these are new and unedited, we do not give criticism. All we do is we give encouragement and support to each other. And you'll see as we do this, it's very easy to be supportive because these ladies are some great writers, and it's so much fun to listen to each other's writing for this. So once again, this week we were given 15 minutes, and this week we decided to play Apples to Apples. If you don't know what Apples to Apples is, it is a game. Tina, can you flash one of the cards? It's a very fun game, by the way, to play with parties, but there's these cards, and we decided to pull 3 cards. 2 of them were adjectives and 1 was a noun. And Tina randomly we pulled numbers and did it all that way. And then we had to write using these 3 words. And this week's words were, I deleted them off my page. Tina, what were these 3 words?
Eyes.
Eyes.
Radiant and cruel.
Eyes, radiant, and cruel. All right, so we are going to share, and I am going to say, how about you, Rhonda, go first, because you've not gone first yet in this.
Okay,
exercise.
Yeah, that'll be good.
All right. Oh,
that'll work out for me just fine today. All right. Okay. The heat was unbearably cruel today. I try to protect my skin from the radiant heat of my wooden deck, but since my eyes have been blinded by the bright light of outdoors, I didn't see that my rake had fallen over, tines up. It's a miracle I'm wearing shoes. It is summer after all. Because of them, I didn't impale my foot when I stepped on the rake. The handle did, however, hit my forehead. That should leave a nice purple goose egg to form just in time for tonight's photo shoot for the volleyball team. Radio's playing songs about heat waves, and now the disc jockey's making some lame joke about a swimming pool. He's killing me. The ice cube I wanted to get for my neck would feel great on my forehead right now. As I bring it up to my face, I see the last of it melting into the flat pool on my hand, so I splat the rest of the pool on top of my head. Oh, sorry. And uh-oh.
Speaking of raw, fresh, and unedited.
Yeah. Marcy, get your kayak and come out here. Everyone in my whole school must be out on the river this afternoon. I'll have to meet you later, I yelled to her. It's nice living on the river, except when my friends are out having fun and I'm here doing chores. That's all I had time for.
That's good.
She's stuck doing chores. And everyone else is out having fun. That's so sad. I know. There's a distinct volleyball team theme to a lot of these stories.
Yeah,
right. I know. You're going to be writing a teen novel here soon. I was going to say the same thing. Like when you were given like words and only so much time, that's where you're headed. Like you go that direction. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, it's like
you never know.
you know these girls, right? And you know how they are
Yeah.
from being
Yeah.
so fresh out of that scene there with the teenage girl and all that. Real
Yeah,
fun.
they-
I like
They
that.
could have been semi-autobiographical.
I know
You
you.
think?
I know you were reading and not looking up, but when you talked about impaling your foot in the, in the getting the forehead, both Jamie and I were like, oh, I didn't see it, Tina, but we were just like, oh no.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
stuff.
yes. And I know that we're all going to take pictures later so that
That was
our
funny.
website will look fun. So, yes,
Yeah.
semi-autobiographical, I know.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, was that real? Like, do you really have a bruise on your head
I
from
know.
the raid?
No,
And do we
not
have to play
now.
volleyball?
Maybe like 20 years ago.
And do we have to play volleyball later?
Yeah, I'm gonna set the net up as soon as we're done.
Ain't happening.
Fun.
All right, let's just go. That was great. Thank
Yeah,
you
it
so much,
was.
Rhonda.
Oh, thanks. Thank
Let's go clockwise, which on my computer means that Jamie's next.
What? Okay, so I'll tell you right away, I did not finish.
Aw.
Boo. But I would have had another 5 minutes. Although maybe I will finish it and post it for my Patreon subscribers to
Oh.
read how it ends.
Oh, great idea.
Okay, so eyes radiant and cruel. The sun shone relentlessly on the players in the outfield. Robbie's ball cap did little to protect his eyes from the cruel radiance of its beams. He held his gloved hand up to help with the glare and felt another bead of sweat slide down his spine. He crouched into the ready position and felt the sweaty elastic of his ball pants cinch him a little more snugly around the middle. Charlie Miniplex was up next, and the infield scooted forward as he approached the batter's box. He held one hand up toward the pitcher while he pressed his cleats into the gravel and flung them backward, kicking up a great cloud of dust. The catcher yelled something Robbie could not hear, fanning his big pillow of a glove in front of his face, and the ump reset his pitch counter. Charlie hoisted the bat with considerable effort and set it upon his shoulder. It hung over Charlie's back impotently, reminding Robbie of the flexible straws that always came with the after-game milkshakes from Linda's diner. "Easy out," Martin Stewart called from third base, and Robbie flinched. Coach Thompson was not a fan of smack talk, and the whole team would be sure to get a lecture if he had heard Martin's remark. Robbie watched as their pitcher and the coach's son, Glenn Thompson, threw two fastballs low and inside and wondered if Charlie would get on first with a walk. Charlie swung at the next two, and Robbie resigned himself to yet another strikeout. When you played the outfield in Little League, having an excellent pitcher had its disadvantages. Robbie dropped his glove and righted himself with a sigh, watching Glenn wind up to deliver Charlie's final strike. The sound of the bat connecting with the ball reached Robbie before his brain could process the vision of Charlie swinging the bat. Robbie saw Glenn's hand shoot straight up and watched the second baseman run backward, his glove, too, held in the air. The ball, Robbie thought. ...
Wow.
You did that on purpose.
Yes.
Fuck. I was typing ball as the guy was saying one. I'm like, oh no.
That was so, like, I was totally there on the ball field with him. Like, just all
Yeah.
the description was just
And that
spot
sweat
on.
down his spine, oh, I could feel it.
I think I started
Yeah.
sweating.
My favorite part, though, was the milkshake straws. The holding the bat, like, so good. Who would ever think to compare that to a straw? But when you did, I was like, yeah, I can totally see it. So great.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
It was
Thanks.
really
I
good.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I totally want to write the end. So yay, because I will write the end later.
Great.
And I will have written more words.
I totally want to read the end.
Yeah. We'll have to subscribe to her Patreon,
Yes.
which
Yeah,
the
okay.
link will also be below of this in this podcast.
You
Awesome.
subscribe to
Thanks.
mine, and I'm going to subscribe to yours.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It's great. All right,
Who's
Tina,
next?
you are next in the
Oh,
clock. Yep.
Okay.
Oddly enough, I'm last. Weird how that happened.
Oh.
And then you were the one who chose the order, so that
Hmm.
It's just totally random and absolutely no way,
Coincidence,
shape, or
I'm
form.
sure.
yes. Okay, here goes. Kirsten sat at the bar nursing her drink. The ice had melted and it tasted like watered down coconuts at this point. She couldn't afford another, so she pretended to sip it whenever the bartender looked over at her, a suspicious look in his eyes. She smoothed the wrinkle out of her black pencil skirt and pulled it down a little to hide the run that was slowly creeping down her nylons. Her
Mm.
blonde curls had lost a bit of their bounce from the humidity of the Alabama summer. She was sure the cigarette smoke cloud that filled the room had long ago overpowered her Chanel number 5. She needed to use the bathroom, but she knew she didn't dare leave her spot at the bar, or leave her drink unattended to be picked up and dumped into the sink by the bartender, or even worse, spiked by a man with cruel intentions. The jukebox was crooning out country and western hits from the 80s. One couple danced to every song on a little empty square of floor, oblivious to anybody or anything else but the taste of each other's beer-tainted lips. Some rough-looking men in leather vests and bare tattooed arms played pool. They laughed too loudly and razzed each other about whatever thing they could think of, sucking on their Budweiser bottles in between shots. This was not the kind of place a girl like her usually came to, and the uneasiness wiggled in her midsection and caused her knees to knock together ever so slightly. She tapped her feet in time to the music to hide it from anyone looking a little too closely. Finally, the tiny earpiece tucked into her right ear crackled and a voice said, "Target approaching building." Kirsten checked her hair and makeup, struck her best pose, and pretended not to care who might at this moment be entering the honky-tonk. "Target approaching," she whispered, knowing the mic hidden on her horn-rimmed glasses would pick it up. The target looked around the bar, taking in all the customers. His gaze paused on Kirsten before continuing around the room, only to come back and rest on Kirsten, who pretended not to notice. Bingo, thought Kristen. The target approached her. "This seat taken?" he asked her, his smile radiant with pearly white teeth. "No. No, it's not," Kirsten replied demurely, pretending it was the first time she had noticed him. "I'm Kiki," she said, holding out her hand, sporting long, garishly pink painted nails. He took her fingertips in his bronze-tinted hand and pressed his full red lips against her knuckles. "Troy, pleased to meet you," he said smoothly, as a snake charmer.
Oh, that's
That's
it?
all.
That was
Oh.
so good. I was
Curfew
not
timer.
expecting that of her.
So, like, is
Oh,
she a
man.
bad person and he's a target because they're gonna con him, or is she like a
Well,
cop or something and he's the target because
I
I
think
guess
she's an
you'll have to.
FBI.
I guess you'll have to, read the rest
That description was so
once I read
good.
it.
Wait, right, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what I thought was fun was that the guys who were playing pool, you said that they sucked on their Budweisers between shots, and I'm like, are they doing shots or are they shooting pool? And so it had a double meaning, and I loved that it did because then I could just decide which it was.
Mhm.
And I also
Mhm.
loved how her uneasiness wiggled in her middle. Like, I mean, it because so many times I've tried to describe those sensations you get in your guts, either because you're scared or whatever. And that was great that you animated uneasiness like that. That was a really cool
Yeah.
word choice there. I love that.
Yeah.
I like the run on her stockings because I have tried to hide so many runs in my life. I totally felt what she was trying to do.
I always have a run in my stockings.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I haven't worn stockings in probably 10 years.
I know, like they stopped, like pantyhose is not a thing anymore.
I'm grateful for
It needs to be.
honest.
More
Why?
people need to wear them.
Why does pantyhose need to be a thing, John Rhonda? I want to know.
So you don't have to shave your legs.
Yes, that's A. Second of all, so that you're warm in a skirt in the wintertime. And
That's what
thirdly,
tights are
because
for.
I've got freckled legs.
Aw, but
your
your
freckles
freckles
are
are
so
so cute. They are really
Jeez.
cute.
Oh, wait, I can't hear you.
We both said exactly the same
couldn't
thing
hear
at
what
the
you
same
just said.
time. So
We both said that. Oh, your freckles are so
cute.
Okay.
Oh,
I think
all
Jen's
right. I'll
trying
go back to not
to
hearing.
avoid the
Adorable.
inevitable.
Mhm.
All right.
It's her turn.
All right. It is my turn, and I will go. Mine is much shorter, but the leaves of the silver maple nearly sparkled in the late afternoon sun. A storm was coming in, or at least that is what the old tree was saying. Its leaves had turned, exposing the gray underside. Grandpa had once told her that was a sure sign of a storm, and for as long as she could remember, he had been right. She shielded her eyes and scanned the sky. The sun still blazed to the west, but dark clouds rustled around it, shoving their way to the front of the line to block it from her view. Even as the clouds began to win out, determined rays fought hard to maintain their radiant display on those old maple leaves. The wind picked up, and the silver maple swished in response. Even as the skies grew cruel, she stood there, breathing in the smell that only comes when heat is quenched by summer rains. The first drops tickled her arms, but still she stood. Maybe this rain could wash her clean, give her a fresh start. Maybe, in all its anger, it could release hers, and the whipping wind could whisk it away, never to be seen again. She was soaking wet by the time she re-entered the house, but the only thing that had changed was her clothes, wet and clingy, drooping in a sad display across her tired, worn-out body.
Wow.
So not a
That's
story.
so sad. Oh.
No happily ever after.
Where's Prince Charming?
Aw.
Oh, there he is.
I was-
Behind Rhonda.
Oh, that'll cheer us up.
This is John.
Aw. Aw, that's that Jen, that was very, very good. That was so poetic.
Oh, thank
It was.
you.
And I was totally in the story at the very beginning when he was talking about the tree said a storm was coming. I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love the whole everything about the tree. I loved.
I like, so
Mhm.
you said it's not a story, but I would argue that it sort of is. I mean, there's like a shattering moment, but it does have a little bit of mystery, which I think that you're longing to finish that mystery. It just leaves so many questions for the reader. It could be the beginning of something, but I would also consider it pretty complete. It's a very neat picture of a
Thanks.
time in a character's life.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree.
It could be a diary entry to start a mystery.
Ooh.
You know, it's funny that you guys said that it was so sad or whatever. When I was finished it, I found hope in it because I guess in my mind I didn't see it as a completed piece. So I look at it like, oh, you think things are bad now, but the sun will come up again. You know what I mean? In my mind, I'm like,
I
oh,
thought you were
this
going to
story's
say,
only
well,
begun.
I thought you were going to say, you think things are
Just
bad
wait.
now, but just wait until
Well,
you see.
that could happen too. That sounds like thunder. What is that noise?
Rhonda, can you plug and unplug your ears, your headphones?
Oh.
Because
It's gone.
it went away.
There we go.
That was really weird. Like a jet
It
flew
was
over.
the storm from Jen's story.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was really great. That was awesome. Thanks. All right, guys. It is time for us to visit the accountability corner once again, where we check in with one another, see how we're doing. We're going to check on each other's goals, whether we met them or not. And we all know that everyone's going to move at his or her own pace. We each pick our own goals. They have to be significant, measurable, attainable, time bound. But then we announce them here in the podcast and then keep each other accountable. So let's start off. We're going to start with you, Rhonda.
Okay. Well, the last 2 weeks before this one, I did not attain my goals because I put my garden in front of it. And this time, I still was able to work in my garden, but every day I intentionally wrote at least a little bit.
Yay!
So I wanted to do 9 articles, have them done by the end of the week. So I didn't do that, but I did intentionally write every day. I disciplined myself to work toward that goal. So I think my total was 7. I think I got at least 1 done a day. So I'm pleased with that.
Great.
Good job, Rhonda.
And-
Rhonda, you used to do content writing for like money, right? Like, so
Yes.
you're kind of
Yes.
seasoned in this area and you kind of know what you're capable of.
Yeah. Yep.
And then also what you're
Yeah.
writing is like what you're doing, right? Like, how are you able to write
Yes.
so much, I guess is my question.
Well, because what I'm doing is I'm just doing articles with a very limited amount of space available. And the articles, once they start being published in the newspaper, I may need to fluff them out a little bit or I may need to cut a little bit out. So I just sort of averaged So those are only an average of 350 to 500 words. So
Okay.
they're very short. And then blog posts, they're going to be between 500 and 1,000 words. So I'm counting articles and blog posts, depending on how much I wrote every day, as one.
Well, if you saw my look of surprise, your microphone like really amplified you for just a nanosecond. So
Oh,
it
I'm
was
sorry.
like you said so, and it was
I try
so it
everything not to
wasn't.
jump.
Yeah, I was not
that was
super
actually me.
astounded by your goal,
Oh,
but good for you. That's
okay.
good job.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
All right, Jamie, how about you?
Well, my goal was 7,000 words for the week, and I sit now at 6478. And because I want to finish my baseball story, I'm hoping I will hit that 7,000 word goal. I think for next week, I'm going to go back to 5,000 words. And here's why, because now that I'm kind of getting a groove under me, life is starting to feel a little bit more like a routine. Great. And then school will start, and then everything will be up anyway. I feel like 5,000 words is reasonable because I have a lot of trunk stuff that I want to pull out and edit. And I need to be creating something new and then spending more time going back and editing. So I don't have to feel like it always has to be about the new stuff. So 5,000 words of new, and we'll see what I do with the editing so that I can set a realistic goal next Tuesday for what amount of work I can have done.
Great. All right, what about you, Tina?
Well, because I am going to camp meeting next week, I don't want to make 1,000 words a day my goal like it has been. So I think what I'm going to do is make a goal that I will write something every day.
Like at 6
Um,
a.m. when I wake you up to write? Because I'll be right there.
If you do that, you better have coffee in your hand. I'm just saying. Just so just take some time every day when to write something. That's my goal.
That sounds great. That would be an improvement for me because I kind of really slacked off this last week. We had family come into town as well, and just preparing for that and everything kind of got me all off kilter. But then I can't keep beating myself up because I did a lot of editing too. That's the thing. As Jamie was talking, I was thinking, yeah, like we have to lower our writing goals, but we're still moving towards publication, right? And that's our thing, is to continue that journey towards publication. And so for me, I have a lot of editing to do to get there as well as writing. So I probably will be doing a whole lot more editing than writing this week. But I'm hoping to get 2,000 words in this week as well as editing, even though I'm going camping as well. But really, only going to be the couple of days at camp before we broadcast again, so we'll see how that goes. So awesome. Well, I think now is a good time to remind all of our listeners that we have a really awesome thing that we would like to give out to you. It's a great resource that's available just for signing up to our newsletter, which is going to be a great newsletter anyway. You'll be able to keep up to date with all that's happening with us here at Christian Indie Writers, as well as know when the latest podcast is released. If you sign up, you will get our critique cheat sheet, which I think is kind of a tongue twister, maybe just for me, but it's a critique cheat sheet, which will help you both give and receive critique. So click the link below this podcast, this webcast, and join our mail list, and you will get yours instantly. Also, if you have not subscribed to our Patreon, why? Why have you not done this yet? Go on over and subscribe, because this week, after this podcast, we will be recording our second postcast. And it is a lot of fun. In the postcast, we share edited works, things that we have written and spent time on, and we give each other full-on critiques. The person that's being critiqued has to go into the isolation booth, not able to talk. So it's worth the money, the monthly money that you'll pay for our Patreon just to watch me not be able to talk. So anyone that knows me, I think I'm going to have friends and family that are going to sign up just for that, just to be able to watch that.
If the Pope watches, they might actually canonize you.
Oh. I don't know what that means.
Make
But
you a
okay.
saint for miracles.
Oh, here's hoping. So please consider subscribing to our Patreon today, and you won't miss out on any of this great fellowship and fun, and all their critiques as well. All right, ladies, that was a great show.
Yes.
Anyone else have anything to add? Join the Patreon.
Nope.
Sign up to Patreon and come see our
Yeah,
postcast.
yeah, ready for that postcast.
That's
It's
where the party's at.
unscripted.
This concludes this episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us next week when we have our episode on plotting versus pantsing.
Ooh,
If you
the
don't know
big
what that
debate.
means, yes, the big debate. And if you don't know what that means, you will find out next week. So until then, may your pen be prolific, your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ. Bye-bye.
Bye.